Okay, everybody. Today on the My Tech Tool Belt podcast, we are so excited to welcome Martin Cisneros, a modern learning advisor, which is a super cool title.
Yes.
I'm jealous
I know.
that you have
I
that
need
title.
to come up with a new title for myself now.
And so Martin is going to talk to us today about differentiating reading strategies using digital tools and to meet the needs of all of our learners. Welcome, Martin.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me. I know this has been in the making for quite a while, so I apologize for my technology not working.
No worries.
It's all good.
No worries. You're here. You're here now, and we're so excited to have you. So we wanted to just kind of take our listeners, give them a little bit of backstory about you before we dive into our topic today. So tell us a little bit about you, kind of where you're at and how you got there. I know that you are also, like me, a longtime Q member and probably been a board member as well. So tell us a little bit just about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, it almost pains me to say I've been close to education for about 30 years now, right? So I'm currently, my day job is I'm an academic technology specialist with the Santa Clara County Office of Education. Have been with them off and on since 2006. I am currently a lead learner for Q and been doing that, I believe, since 2013, but don't get me caught up on that. But I've been, I just reached my 20th year presenting at a Q event. At Fall Q. So I've been presenting at Q since 1999, but I attended my first Q in 1993.
Wow.
Just to give you guys some. And then I also work with the Cross Center of Innovation out here at Foothill College. And I also do some consulting at the techbuffet.com, which is stuff that I've developed over the past years. But yeah, and I got my, I really got my start in education. I was a graphic designer to start off, and I had a friend of mine who ran an outdoor ed camp in San Diego. And it was a Sunday, I remember. He calls me up. He's like, "Hey," he goes, "Do you still do that survival stuff where you're, And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You grew up in Yosemite, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, by there. I'm from the Central Valley." I go, "Still goes on its way." And then he goes, "Yeah, you think you come and do this, teach this to my kids?" I'm like, "Oh, wow." And, he was a good friend of mine. I'm like, "Robert, I had no idea you had kids." He's like, not my personal kids. He goes, "I run this outdoor ed camp." And I go, "Don't you have teachers for that?" And then he's all like, "I do, but, they called me on Friday after they left and they said they weren't coming back."
Oh.
So he needed bodies at this outdoor ed camp, and he thought I'll be perfect. So long story short, I went up the mountain as a graphic designer and came back wanting to be a teacher because I had that one student that really changed. He reminded me of myself and a lot of friends that I had about, what, I wish we had teachers that were like us. I wish I could become a teacher like the one that I needed at a certain point in my life, and that's really how I got into education. And, I really kicked off the gate starting at the bottom with the little ones as a kinder teacher. So the best way I always tell folks, the best way I can tell you what I have and have not taught is I can tell you what I have not taught. So I have not taught first and second grade. I have not taught 7th, and I have not taught 10th and 11th. I've taught everything else.
Wow.
So after I went through that wonderful gamut, at my 10th year, someone finally said, "You know what, you'll probably make a great administrator. Maybe you should do that." So, I took the bite, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I went and I got my, went did my master's, got my administrative credential, became a VP, then a principal. And then after becoming a principal, I said, "Yeah, no, thank you. You can keep all that." But I would always find my groove in teaching other teachers how to enhance because personally, I just love learning. I've been, with the whole Q deal, we call ourselves lead learners, but I think I've been that since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I've always loved showing other kids how I learn. I just love to learn, period. So, education has always been a double sword for me because there was teachers who brought the best out of me, and there was other teachers who just wanted to contain me. And I'm like, I learned long ago that, to change my ABCs, which for me, it's the ambition, the behavior, and the concept of school was very different for me. I always thought as a kid, you make school what you want it to be. And throughout life, I've always seen it that way. So when I became an educator, it's like, well, first of all, I always tell folks, I've never been a scope and sequence educator. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying here, but scope and sequence is you just teach directly from what's on the curriculum.
Right.
And the reason why I say I was never that teacher was because my first real credentialed assignment, I was given a 3-4-5 combo. I'm going to repeat that again, a 3-4-5 combo. And they asked me during the interview, they're like, Mr. Cisneros, are you bilingual? So I puffed my...
No worries.
Oh, okay. All right. So when I was being interviewed for my first job, I remember them asking me a lot of questions like, Mr. Cisneros, are you bilingual? So I remember like being really proud. I'm like, si soy, right? Because what I always tell folks is like, you have to remember where I started teaching. So I was in, South San Diego, 5 minutes away from the beach, 10 minutes away from Tijuana. So you can just imagine our PD back in those days. But I told people, I go, what, besides English, what other language, right? So in my head, I'm like, I got this job. And it was one of those districts that everyone wanted to get into. So I just remember saying the right answers. They're like, Mr. Cisneros, would you like to teach different grade levels? And I'm like, I cocked my head. I'm like, well, so far I have the kindergarten thing underneath me. Yeah, I don't know where I want to end up. So yeah, I'll try different stuff. And I just kept on seeing eyebrows go up and down. I'm like, oh, I'm saying the right stuff. They're like, Mr. Cisneros, would you like to work, year round?
Whoa.
And I looked at him like, well, that's an interesting question. But then I don't know if I told you this, I was a graphic designer prior. And my first check as an educator, I picked it up. I'm like, oh, how cute. Is this for like resources and stuff? And then I realized like, oh, no, that's your real paycheck. And I'm like, oh, good Lord. Yeah, no, I need to work all year. This is what you're paying. And then, so all these different questions, I just see eyebrows go up and down. So at the very end, they're like, Mr. Cisneros, this is it. Here's what I ended up with. I ended up with a 3-4-5 combo class, and I was a rover. So if you have no idea what a rover is, that means that you pretty much belong to a year-round school, which that was the first time I ever heard of a year-round school. So you have 4 different tracks, 2 months on, 2 weeks off, 2 months on, 2 weeks throughout the whole year. So there was no summer vacation like many of us know of. And the other wonderful thing was, as a rover, no matter what day that the month ended, whether it ended on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, didn't matter. You had to get all your stuff up out of your room and on, ready to roll in whatever other room you were assigned. So in other words, I never had my permanent room.
Wow.
So when I tell people about teaching, I was never a scope and sequence teacher because I had a 3-4-5 combo. And oh, by the way, Mr. Cisneros, are you bilingual? Si soy. Yeah, well, only about a third of my kids could either understand me whether I spoke English or Spanish, because we had 17 different languages being spoken at this school.
How many different?
17. And 7 were being spoken in my classroom. So that was my introduction to our wonderful profession. The great thing, though, is I had really they used to call it Central Station because there was Central Elementary, but all the master teachers worked at this elementary, and they all took really great care of me. So they were feeding me information, and you know how you are as a first-year teacher, you're just soaking everything up.
Right.
So I always learned how to build learning experiences. That's how I learned to be a teacher, is I create my own curriculum. I make sure that my students are involved. This whole thing about UDL and SEL that we're hearing about now, I'm like, well, no, that's pretty much what we did, because it had to be. In order for you to be a successful educator and have a successful class where students are succeeding, you needed to have that. You needed to plan backwards. You needed to include your students in there. So along the way, technology has always been like my aha. And I got to tell you, back in the 90s, early 90s, tech companies used to give away those wonderful computers. And I always tell this story to folks. It's like, you remember those wonderful things that were like 19 inches in the front, but as soon as you turn that wonderful thing around, it looked like a huge 80-pound alien head. But the thing was, my students would come up and like moth to a flame, the screen would just attract them. So I thought, okay, I got to learn how to do this and somehow use this in my instruction. So I went around, the rest of the classrooms and would tell the other teachers, hey, I see some wonderful, dirt graffiti on your brand new computers. Can I have them? And the answer was mostly yes, because there was no professional learning. There was no internet. There was no tech director. They were just giving these things out, and hopefully they thought by osmosis, we teachers would learn how to use them and teach the kids. So that was the beginning of my ed tech career. Because back then I tell people I would buy my software where people still buy 100 pounds of, popcorn, 300 pounds of hot dogs. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's Costco on the West Coast and whatever it is on the East Coast. But, back in those days, I used to go in there at the end of every month. Why? Because that's when we got paid. And I used to buy 3 pieces of software. And I used to go early on Monday morning with a 6-pack of Pepsi for our custodian / tech person / bus driver / cook. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, / Little Leagues coach as well. So his name was Angel. And I always, make sure Angel got his Pepsis every Monday morning. And I would say, hey, Angel, can you install these? And, he would grab one and he would look at it. He goes, oh, wow, this is great. Unfortunately, we don't have enough memory to run this, so, you can't use it. Oh, wow, Martin, you got Las Aventuras de Sticky Bear. Oh, wow, look at this, right? Oh, our screens don't have enough resolution, so you can't use this. Oh, my gosh, what is this? Oregon Trail 2.0. This time we're surviving. Oh my gosh, this one will work. Awesome. How many copies did you buy? Oh,
One.
You just bought one? And then he would do it, like when he puts the little pinky up, like it's stunk all of a sudden. He goes, where do you want me to install this in? And of course, he would end up installing it on my computer. But you know how that story goes, right? So the very first time around, it was just about consuming, using tech. And it wasn't until years later that I figured out it's not about me using the tech. It's about students using the tech.
Right.
So I'm going to fast forward you to the year was 1998. I am now in Central California, working in Monterey County, and I connect with the university, Monterey Bay. I connect with our local government, our mayor, who helped fund me, and I produced an after-school program on digital citizenship. Right. And it became on media literacy. It got so good that we had Al Roker come and shadow us for 2 days. And so that was my first really breakthrough into like this whole ed tech deal. Because for me, it was just like putting cameras into our students' hands and having them produce media so they can understand media. Right? Forget the computer stuff. That was the flashy part that got them into the after school program. But then it was just the learning. But it got to the point where we were making video yearbooks. People would come up to me and they're like, "Hey, do you have students who can do a quinceañera? Can they do a baptism? Can they come and do a wedding?" So for a lot of those kids, this became a side hustle for them.
Wow.
And when they got up to high school, later on in college, that became their career. Doing digital video for different things. But during that time, my big aha was, when you allow kids to create, they own their learning.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my big aha in 98 and 99. So in 99, I was finally put out of the classroom by Mr. Tim Landick, who's now the tech director out of Los Gatos Unified. But he's known in the SEPA world. He's known in the Q world. He's been in Q for such a long time as well. But he's like, you need to do this with other teachers. You need to showcase this. So that was really my beginning. And prior to that, just because I've always been a graphics guy, I was always a ghostwriter for presentations for people. So I never knew about ISTE. I never knew about SEPA and all these other wonderful places. All I knew is people would come and pay me if I could do their presentations.
Wow.
And so it was a side hustle. And then I started doing websites. So it was a way for me to learn, but at the same time, it's like, out of all the wonderful money that they pay teachers, it's just a way to support my family as well. But along the way, I kept on learning. It's like, if I can do this, my kids can do like the stuff that they were producing was just amazing. And I even thought to myself, well, maybe they hire me, but I hire them. And in some cases, I ended up doing that, and that became their summer job. So, anyways, it was a cyclical deal. But as we kept on going up, I said, I went into administration afterwards. Didn't really like it, but I like coaching. Coaching was my jam, still is my jam. And whether it was a district coach, 2006, 2007, went up to county level, worked for CTAP, the California Technology Assistance Project. That's where I met the infamous John Carrepo. We were both coordinators, and I still remind him to this day. We're sitting down at a restaurant in Monterey for some type of ed tech conference. He had his director knew my director, so we sat down together, and that was the first year that the iPhones came out. And it was within the week that they had come out. So I turn around, I see this guy with the iPhone. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got it too? And Brian Couric, who's also from Fresno County Office of Ed. So we're like three kids, right? Like, oh my gosh, you got the same game? So we started talking about that and the possibilities. And next thing I know, and it's like around 6:30, 7 o'clock, somewhere around there. So this is after the conference. We're at the wharf in Monterey, and all of a sudden we see all these people just turn around and start listening to us. So that became like, our first impromptu ed camp in public. And after that meeting, it was like, oh, there's other people like me out here. And, John and I have been really great friends, so I love what he's done. But I just think it's like, oh, there's a lot of people out here like us, right? I'm looking at two of them right now. But, back in those days, it was hard for us to find each other unless you went to things like this.
Right.
And the other part is you are that way, but sometimes you don't want to share. And that's where I saw the power of just sharing information as well. How do you learn? So, as stuff went forward, did the CTAP, and then I went over to Monterey County, became their ELL/tech coordinator. And then in 2013, went back to Santa Clara. We started up a new team, all around, digital badging and creating micro-credentials and figuring out ways to enhance professional learning. Because we were done with professional development. And the way we see is professional development is something that's done to you, or professional learning is something you do with, right? And that's the way I see learning is I want to learn with you. I might have some knowledge, but I know, you guys have some knowledge. Let's put, your chocolate with my peanut butter and let's figure this stuff out. The whole saying about, it takes a village to raise a child, in education, the way I see it, it takes different strategies to enhance the child. So if it's a great strategy, it's going to work. Are all strategies going to work with all students? The answer is no. But, that's the promise of technology is, tools change and, but the thing is you have to develop great, learning strategies and then bring the tools inside. So that's been my jam, so working with Q, presenting for ISTE, presenting for, across the globe now. But my joy comes out of how do I enhance people and how do I build student agency? There's teacher agency and there's also student agency. But as probably you guys know, I say this because I've been here for a minute in our wonderful profession. And I tell people, if you came into our profession prior to the 2000s, you knew how to design a lesson plan. If you came in during the No Child Left Behind between 2000 and 2010, you were part of the scope and sequence. So if you came into that, that's what you knew. And then all of a sudden, Common Core came along in 2010. And it's like, oh, no, we want you to design stuff. We want flexible learning spaces, UDL. And everybody's like, whoa, no, just tell me where it's at. And what I tell people, it's hard because you also had students, you want me to think? No, just tell me what question you want me to answer and where should I find it? And then there's parents. What do you mean you're not giving my kid an ABC? No. Just what? No, this other stuff? No. I need to know whether my kid's going to college or not. Right? So you have all these different variables, and there's no cohesion of how we get to it. And then we talk about blended learning, and I'm going to tell you, even today, we still get administrators. What do you mean blended learning? What does that mean? They're a one-on-one, right? They're a one-on-one school, they're a one-on-one school district, and they still are struggling with that concept. So I tell folks, my job will never be done. At least in my lifetime, but we can put a dent in it. So my focus has been in how do we create agency for educators, but specifically for students, because we live in a place where our learners can learn pretty much anywhere, anytime, at any place, and at any pace, right? And I think that's what a lot of schools are getting right when they do project-based learning, when they do inquiry-based learning. But I'm still, I'm struggling with the schools who are like, we don't know whether we should do that or not.
Right.
Oh, you don't know whether you want your students to succeed or not. That's very interesting. So, over the past, let's say 10 years now, I started thinking, well, what's going to be your mark? And I'll be honest with you. A good friend of mine, Corey Orlando, and I were talking about this during Fall Q. And I go, I've been in this game long enough where I have people who come up to me and like, oh my gosh, I still use the stuff that you taught us. And I sit back and I think, because I've covered many different topics over my years, but I do not want to leave this earth being the Zoom guy.
Right.
Now,
Right.
let me explain what the Zoom guy is for those of you who do not know me. If you ever been to any of my sessions, you're going to see, wow, how do you zoom in on that particular piece? How do you do that? Because I do it like if I'm DJing, right? Because I'm going, like, if you, let me explain a little bit about how I do professional learning. I'm the person that will have 200 slides for 20 minutes. Because it's a journey that I take you through. And it's like, choose your own professional learning. I have an idea where I want to take you, but the feedback that I'm getting with the audience is where I take you through this journey. Afterwards, you leave with my slide deck that has 102 things that what we talked about that allow you to go in a little deeper. But along the way, because of time and because I know there's different technology levels in my audiences all the time, I do this thing where I zoom in on a certain component. Now, I see people where they zoom in the full thing, and I use the accessibility piece on the Mac where it just zooms in a small box. Long story short, I still get people that I've trained like 15 years ago. They'll come up to me and they're like, they're superintendents now, right? They're directors, and they were teachers back in the day. They're like, oh my gosh, I went to your thing on English language learners back in. I'm like, oh wow. I'm like, that's great, thank you. And remember that Zoom thing that I still, and I'm like, wow, that's what
your takeaway.
that's your takeaway. Yeah. So I was like, wow. And you guys understand this as well, right? You put sweat and tears and blood into developing these wonderful professional learning experiences. But what do they walk away with? Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, anyways. So I'm literally in the middle of creating a video. So I'm just gonna have that on YouTube. So people, when they ask me about it, I'm just gonna push that out. So yeah. So getting back to the whole impact deal, I started really looking at I present at GABEC, present at NABE, California Association of Bilingual Education, National Association of Bilingual Educators, and I started to figure out that, wow, there's a lot of teachers who don't understand they have English language learners in their classroom and they have no way of supporting them.
Right.
Because they did not come into this profession with the idea that they were going to support English as additional language, because we're now in that spot. So I say, you'll hear me say EAL quite a bit. And that's where my head started going about a decade ago to produce these set of professional learning experiences about, I call them the do's and don'ts of mainstream English language learners, right? Mainstream teachers of English language learners. And it was also a way for me to get my foot in the door. We talk about like where we want to present. So I just knew if I threw in the word equity or English language learner or whatever it is I'm designing, I'm in. I'm a shoe-in, right? And I tie it up to UDL. I tie it up into the 4 C's. I call it the 5 C's because I introduced learning culture. Anyway, but what I started realizing is, oh my gosh, we're here in the state of California, so it's back in that day it was a given. We're 1 in 5 are English language learners. We're now 1 in 4 are foreign born. But if you look at the scope of the U.S., it's going to be 1 in 4 by 2025, and that's just around the corner.
Wow.
So for me, we hear a lot about teacher shortage. But when you really focus in on the research, the teacher shortage are for teachers for English language learners and teachers of STEM, right? So those are the 2 topics that are in the back of my head every time we're producing something, whether it's at the county office or stuff that we do through Q or even at Foothill College or stuff that I do on my own, is how do we get our teachers prepared and how do we get students prepared? So I once again, that's how I tie up the whole student agency. Is how do we build strategies that no matter where they go, no matter what they do, that they can learn and use to learn on their own and be motivated, right? Be motivated because, if we listen to whether it's Seth Godin or Malcolm Gladwell or, anyone in that stature where they talk about that it takes anywhere between 100 hours to 200 hours for a person to learn something. I think about teachers and I think about professional learning. Most of our school districts get anywhere between 4 to 6 days out of the year, and that's not enough.
Right.
That is not enough, right? We're fortunate that in our county office, we're 15 minutes away from Google. We're 20 minutes away from Apple. We're another 20 minutes, we're 20 minutes away from everyone because we're in the heart of Silicon Valley. And everyone, is coming out and saying, Martin, we need people who can adjust, who can adapt, who can lead teams from different backgrounds and be ready to learn something new and apply it.
Right.
And that's not being produced in the amount that we need. So, once again, it makes me reflect like, okay, how am I helping the situation out? So, that's how I revert back to, okay, I've been doing this thing called differentiating reading digitally. Because here's the other thing that I know is, you and I grew up with learning from these things called books,
Mhm.
right? And at the end of the book, what does it say? The end,
Yeah.
right? It says the end. You guys ever been to the end of the internet?
I-
No. And
Yes.
if you have, you should not be there. The FBI will be there soon. Do not be at the end of the internet. So I always tell folks, I go, okay, we need to show kids, how do you, even teachers, how do you go through all this stuff, right? It's different types of media. And, the strategies I used to teach my kids, didn't matter what grade level, was like, when you first see the books, read the front part of the book, read the back of the book, go through every chapter, look what the titles are, and then read the last 2 paragraphs of every chapter. That, before you even start, just do that. That's going to give you a sense of what the whole overarching deal is. You can't do that with the internet because you end up in a hole.
Right.
So I over the years, I have 4 wonderful kids myself, ranging from the age of 23 to 7.
Wow.
Right. And, throughout there, especially the older ones, the oldest one has gone through this ed tech journey with me since he was born, because he was born in 96. My latest feature, my 2012 model, he's learning about how to consume and produce information in different ways. And I keep on thinking, this is something that parents need to know, that teachers need to know. I do these presentations for parents sometimes about digital well-being, and a lot of them are scared because they're now facing addiction, and it's all about the whole thing about consuming versus creation. We talk about a screen time, but I believe what many people believe, not all screen time is created the same.
Right.
It's what kids are doing during that time. So anyways, I'm going through this journey, and how this was cemented for me was about a little over a year ago. So like you guys, right, I have to learn the latest and greatest. I have to keep up on stuff. So I've been avoiding Minecraft, like, oh man, I just I don't have time for this. It's just something else. But there's a lot of people who are really interested, and people who buy in are really on that Kool-Aid. So I told myself, and I told my partners at the county office, Microsoft had a training that was nearby. I'm like, and it was going to be on how to use Minecraft in education. I'm like, we got to do this. This is our chance. And I had my partner, Karen Larson, who's like, okay, yes, we're both going to go in and learn. So we go there, and it takes this, once again, what's my title? I'm an academic technology specialist. I've been doing this for 20 years now. It takes me 45 minutes to figure out how to use the controls, right?
Yes.
No,
And I'm like, are you kidding me, right? I'm like, I'm freshman learner once again. And then, so anyways, I come home, I see the whole thing, and I'm like, wow, this is really great. Okay, I'm going to write a blog about it. So I come home, and my little guy, so I got to tell you a little bit about my little guy. I have a 7-year-old who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5.
Okay.
So, when the doctor told us from Stanford, they're like, don't expect too much out of him, especially verbally, in communicating with you guys. He goes, maybe at age 9 or 10, something will happen. So my wife and I, at that point, we said, okay, challenge accepted. Let's do this, right? Fast forward, he's now 7. This was, a few years ago. So, kids bilingual, kids learning how to code, right?
Wow.
And on his iPad next to me, he's I got to rewind back a little bit. Everything that I put on his iPad is for creation.
Right.
So the only consumption at the moment is YouTube and, of course, Google. But I'll tell you the reason why I installed Google just this year. So he's there, and he's on this app that looks almost identical to Minecraft, and he's building stuff. And I'm like, I'm in my blog, right? It's already like an hour and a half because I'm a very slow writer. And I'm like, I'm talking about how it took me 45 minutes and, how it's hard to innovate when in the classroom. And I do a double take, and I'm like, hey, buddy. I go, what are you building? And with the big old smile, he turns around, he looks at me, he's like, hey, Dad. He goes, I'm building an indoor park. And this is my spot. Here's my spot for my friends. Here's my spot for my teacher. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, wow. This, I didn't teach him, right? Yeah. He learns differently. He's wired a little differently than the rest of us are, but he's learning how to build stuff. So it made me realize, once again, it's about, I bought him this application about 3 years ago. He never took to it. all of a sudden it makes sense to him, and he's building stuff with it now. But it made me realize is you gave him that agency. Now he's building stuff that's on his brain. So I held out. I held to that concept for a while, and about 3 weeks later, I'm like, all I kept on thinking is like, how am I going to continue to enhance his student agency, because he is wired differently. So if it works on him, it's going to work pretty much on anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally got it. So one day I came home. This was on a Saturday, and I go, let me show you something, buddy, because we love parks. Whether it's an indoor park, that means a mall park, outdoor park, and he loves carousels. So any carousel in California, we've been to. We're now starting to go outside of California to looking for carousels and outdoor parks. So I go in there, and since we're close by to Santa Cruz, I clicked on his iPad, I downloaded Google, and I clicked on the microphone. And on there, I said, Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk Carousel. And of course, whoosh, everything pops up. He sees the images, he sees the videos, and I wish I would have recorded his face when he saw that, because that in his head, lights just went off everywhere. So he grabs it, and the week prior to that, we were in San Francisco, so we were at Pier 39 and whatever. So he didn't know how to say the full word, so he said, carousel, San Francisco, and other stuff came out. So he quickly realized, I have to say it in a certain way, and I have to say certain phrases to get what I want. I lost him for the next 3 hours and a half. Next thing I knew, he's talking about pterodactyls. He's talking about gravity. He somehow knew that the moon and the waves had something to do with gravity. So he now has a path. He now has a way of getting information. He knows how to quickly view videos, and he knows that if it's under 5 minutes, it's a great video. Because I tell teachers all this all the time. If you have anything longer than 5 minutes in the classroom, it's like a documentary.
Right.
No one can see documentaries for that long. So it allowed me to reflect. It's like, no, once again, it's a good teaching strategy.
Right.
So that, once again, allowed me to say, okay, no, you're in the right path here. It's how do you find not only the motivation, but, how you then, when you're looking through the vast amount of tools that we now get on a yearly basis, is I always ask myself, how will this build student agency for my students? Not only for my personal kids, but for students as well. So with that, over the years, I kept on doing this thing about, what's something that anyone, no matter whether you're pre-K, no matter you're 12th grade or your university, what can you take away? So I developed a set of strategies called digital design strategies, and all of them have to do with particularly developing a student agency at all different levels, but specifically, for kids who are wired differently and English as additional learners. So the next set of tools that I now present, I don't think I go anywhere now without presenting this series. So I'm glad I get to share it with you guys as well. But my whole thing is, like, I said before, of all the information that is now printed, I think, that of all the information that we now produce, the research shows that it's only 0.001% that will ever be printed from here on forward. Right? When I see school districts were now going 1-to-1, a lot of the publishers are also going digital. So my question is, well, how do you scaffold that? How do you chunk that information? So I set up these rules about what normally happens in the classroom, and some strategies and some tools that will help you get to the next level. So at this point, I'm going to talk about it, but if you are on the viewing side, you can either see this on the Tech Tool Belt YouTube video, or you can, I'll tell you some other places where you can get this information, but I'm going to showcase some stuff now on my computer, but I'm also going to talk about how I use it and why I use it.
Awesome. Perfect. That's so great.
Right.
So thinking about, you're going to run us through some of these tools and strategies on how you're scaffolding for English English
as an
additional language learners.
Yes,
so
yes,
we
yes,
usually say like English language learners or ESL, English as a second language. So you today for the first time have introduced me to EAL, English as an additional language. I do like that. I'm going to start I work in higher ed as well. I think, I work at the university. And so I'm going to start using that and just throw people for a loop.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. All right. So we're ready. So if you are, if you're listening to our podcast, there will be a companion video on YouTube when this launches, that will have all of the components in this segment for you to click on. So you can check that out, the mytechtoolbelt.com. All right, let's go, Martin. What do you got for us?
All right, so I'm not going to share.
Yeah.
We're looking at this. And the first thing I tell folks is if you're anything like a regular teacher, right, you'll go out to the internet and you'll find something that's really, really great. You're like, oh my gosh, I found this really great article about, the human, brain and the new AI algorithms that's going to be like the winning combination. So we're hearing, certain global schools are now using AI to help teachers with teaching and learning in the classroom. So as I'm talking about this, if I'm presenting this in the classroom, if you're seeing this, what you're seeing is the Disney stuff. You're seeing the guy talk about the Forbes of Oz. You're seeing everything else except what I want you to pay attention to.
Right.
So the first tool that I tell all my educators to have, and including, for students as well, these are all Google extensions, by the way. So I'm using Google Chrome extension that enhances your web browsing capability. But the first tool on the set is something called Mercury Reader. Now, when I click on Mercury Reader, the first thing you're going to notice is that it eliminates all of the distractions, right? So all of the advertisements go away, but it does some other wonderful things. The first thing you're going to notice is that the text size changes, and I always use large. Why do I use large? Because I love my kids in the back of the room. Right now, depending what setup you have in your classroom, whether you have a 70-inch monitor or you have a projector, those kids in the back still don't get that viewing pleasure. The other component is the whole shifting between sans and serif, right? So if you're not up to date on why one uses versus the other, if I can't zoom in really great, but if you look at the endings of this font, you're going to see they have little tails, right? And if we use sans, of course, there's no tails. So why does that make a difference? Because you and I grew up with tails, right? We grew up in the analog way. That was easier for us to read. But where's most of our reading being done now? It's being done on a screen. So this might make the difference. I always tell folks that the reality is to figure out who's in front of you. Ask your kids, what is better? Better yet, have this installed in the kids' computer so they can decide what is better for them. And then last but not least is this whole dark theme versus light theme. I love me some dark theme on everything that I can throw on, right? So the biggest reason is a few years back, I told my optometrist I didn't want to look as cool as other kids wearing glasses. And I go, this is my job. My job's in front of screens quite a bit. And then, he told me about, well, maybe you should be doing this. So after 2 hours of viewing regular stuff, I would always get, my eyes would strain quite a bit. But that's because of all the white light that's coming to me. So now, whether I'm using my mobile devices or especially if I'm like on my laptop here, I throw this around so my eyes don't get as strained anymore. Mm-hmm. So, that's just under Mercury. And then my favorite, because I'm a different type of learner, like many kids are. There's a section down here that once you use Mercury, the extension, it allows you to send it to your Kindle. Mm-hmm. Now, whether your kids own a Kindle or not, it doesn't matter because you can download the app for free. And with Kindle, you have, the text to voice, you can highlight, you can do flashcards, you can do, once again, you can have different ways of representing this information for your students and allow the students to chunk or read this information in whatever style that makes most use for them. So that's my number one, right? My number one is like, if you don't have, Mercury installed, that's the first thing. But here's the next problem. The next problem.
I'm going to go back to Mercury Reader really quick because I do.
Sure.
When I do my assistive technology trainings, Mercury Reader is my number one as well. And
mm-hmm.
the text is actually research-based. The font text is research-based for kids with or adults with different kinds of dyslexia. So those two are the most common for readers with dyslexia to be able to process. And so that's what's fascinating about those two. And I feel like oftentimes kids can scrape by with their mild dyslexia with even not even being identified. And by switching the text, it will often help clarify one or the other, will get them to kind of get over that hump to be able to process the information better. So I often say, I believe that many learning challenges go undiagnosed because they're moderate to minor. but they put kids at a disadvantage, or even adults at a disadvantage. I'm a slower reader, or I things get a little mixed up in my brain. But by switching that text, it might actually make a huge difference. And those are the two that are most research based. So I thought that was interesting when I learned that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to add that to my tech tool belt as well. Thank you. So here's
and this is so nice to have for anybody who's giving a presentation. Doesn't matter if it's students. I mean, even I've gone to many presentations where I can't see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sitting far enough back. I'm thinking, wow, that must look really good if you're close.
Right.
If you're a clickbaiter, like you're easily distracted by whatever was going on that piece.
Squirrel.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Shiny object syndrome, man. Like.
No, I hear you.
Sorry.
All right. No. This is good stuff. So here's the other thing, right? Is that if I refresh this thing, the other thing I always tell people is, what would this be fine, to give to your students? Now it depends once again, what your students, what grade level they are, right? And that's not really the grade level, but what reading level.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can see my screen really quick, just take a wild guess. What do you think the reading level is on these two paragraphs that you see here?
It's probably, I don't know, 8th grade.
I'd say 11th.
All right. And I have no idea where you guys got your information, but if someone was to ask me, the simple thing, I always revert back to, or somewhere in my education, I was told that most newspapers and magazines are written like at a 6th grade reading level.
Okay.
All right.
Fair enough.
And I thought, okay, so it has to be somewhere around there, but I forget that the way blogs and articles are produced now are completely different than when you and I used to get something in front of us.
Right.
Because when you and I would get something in front of us, it would go through different writers, different editors, and maybe a different publisher or two. So there were many eyes that would see that piece before it went live. The reality that anyone can be an author today, and we have shorter time frames. This might not make sense. I'm gonna give you an example, right? So if I'm teaching 6th grade, I'm like, oh, this is great. We're talking about how do we use drones? How can we use code to enhance, farming for our farmers? And this is a great article. Then I have this tool that tells me when I click on it, oh, those 2 paragraphs, Martin, on the Flesch Kincaid reading level, it's 13.6.
Whoa. Look at
Woo, right? So yeah. So once
made it up, we were guessing.
Yeah, no. So in my head, I'm also kind of lying because those were just the 2 paragraphs, right? If I highlight the whole paragraph now, I'm highlighting the whole paragraph to that text. I click on it. The reality is that whole article is, you were right, 11th grade.
Wow.
Right? So what's kind of cool, so this is called Crafty Level, all right? It's Crafty Level, and you can find that at crafty184.com. They have some other great extensions there, but I kind of like this one because the problem is that a lot of teachers, especially if you have English as additional language learners in your classroom, you might think, oh yeah, they understand that, and I see this all the time, where teachers will go up to students and like, did you understand it? And then, of course, everyone's going to shake their head and say yes, or they're not going to say anything because it's like 2 minutes before recess is over. And yeah, we're not going to tell you we don't understand because no, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, as an educator, I really love this article, right? And I'm always bummed when I see teachers that water down their curriculum because they think that their students can grasp the content. And this is where assessing, especially English learners, where, unfortunately, I see many educators assess them for their language and their content at the same time, and those are 2 different things.
Mm-hmm.
For me. So my whole process is, first of all, understand what you're trying to give them, right? So now we understand that this is the 11th grade reading level, but I want them to really chew all this information. But how do you do it? Right? This is not on any of my supplemental material, but it's great information. It's April 2019, so it's current.
Right.
So here is part of the tools is, once again, Mercury is to eliminate the distraction so we can see it. Crafty is to let us know more or less, what reading level this was geared for. But now these next set of tools, there's 3 of them that I'm going to show you. is how do you chunk that information down without watering it down, right? Because I don't want to get rid of this. I don't want to go find, like the rest of the world. I only have 24 hours in my day to develop these experiences. So the first one is I have a love-hate relationship with this with this next tool, because sometimes it would go on and then it wouldn't work for 3 months. So when I was showcasing it, it wasn't working. The people couldn't download it. But I can say that now for the past 6 months, they've been on it. They've been updating it, so it looks good. But here's what it does, right? So we're looking at the same article, and this is called TLDR. When I first saw this, I'm like, oh, they finally made an app when I was in college. Too lazy, didn't read. but it really is too long, didn't read. But look, if you're seeing it, what it does is when you click on the extension, it'll go through that article, and then it'll chunk it for you, right? And if you look on the left-hand side, it gives you 3 different levels. So it uses machine learning, artificial intelligence, to look for and break and chunk it down for you, right? Now, I say this because we can now do this with pretty much anything that's out there. But I'll be honest with you. At my work, I go through so much research that it's just, I get a little muffled every now and then, where I read something for 45 minutes, and on the 46th minute, I realize this is not going to take me anywhere.
Right.
But at the same time, I've already lost 45 minutes into this. Tools like this allow me to chunk information and say, oh, is this even worth me reading the remainder of the deal? So once again, it's, I think about not only student agency, but teacher agency. For teachers, whatever their reading level is, they can grab this, throw it on, whether they're using a learning management system, whether it's Canvas or Edmodo or Google Classroom or whatever, Seesaw, they can now chunk it for the types of students. Now, what people tell you all the time is, Martin, have you been to my class? I have more than 4 different reading levels. And I'm like, well, ma'am, I have more than just one tool. So let me just show you the next one. So the next one is one that has become my favorite, and it's called Resumer. So Resumer does something that I've been able of doing on my Mac for quite a while. If you own a Mac, you understand under the accessibility component, you can grab any text from anywhere, and there's a summarize feature in there where you can break anything down into sentences or paragraphs. And what Resumer does the exact same thing on any computer that you can run Chrome in, which makes a huge difference, especially since a lot of our schools are going one-on-one, specifically with Chromebooks. So what I love about this, it gives me a few extra features. So once again, I'm in the same article. I'm going to click on Resumer here. And when I do, the little internet gophers go to work, and this is what we see. As you see, it's going through that process, and it reduces it down to 27%, or in other words, 567 words out of the 2061. Well, this is great, right? But down here, I can now download it as a PDF, download it as a Microsoft document, Word document, or I can copy it over to a Google Doc. But it gets better. If I click on the manual, it does the same thing, and now it gives me that Apple feeling where I can now break this down into whatever reading level I have in my classroom, because I now get this slider, right? So when people say, Martin, I have more than 4 different reading levels, well, TLDR is just for the quick one, but if you really need to dive deep into something, this manual component allows the slider, so you can break it all the way down to 10% of the whole article. Wow. And it gets even better. This next thing, when I saw it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love it. I need it. It's in my life, right? This is why we love technology. This is the promise of tech in education. So I'm going to hit Optimize now. When I hit Optimize, it gives me the key academic vocabulary of that article. Are you kidding me? Do you know how long it would take me as a regular teacher to go through all the academic vocabulary components of whatever I was trying to teach my students? Better yet, right? So as you're seeing here, it goes through everything, and I love this component, right? Once again, I can download it in different formats. And then last but not least, if I click on Analyze here, I can select, maybe a certain group, a certain topic, but here's my other favorite component. It
Wow.
goes to the whole article and it highlights the most important sentences.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Right? Okay, I want to drop a mic, but I don't have a mic, so I'm going to drop my AirPods here. Here's my AirPods. Bam! There you go. There you go. I just dropped the AirPods. Right? Think about just even as an adult learner of all the stuff you go through, right? And the way I see this when I was in college, and of course, I would always go for the used books. I'll try to save a little money, right?
Yeah.
And I would see 5 different highlights of the same paragraph, and I'm like, okay, this might be important. I might pay attention to this, right? So it's that similar deal, but it's digital on anything that's online.
Wow, that's crazy.
I love it.
I'm adding this to my my flow for sure.
Yeah.
I'm adding it to my tool belt. Yeah, absolutely. Just my personal.
I
was like,
absolutely.
The tools get better. We're now we're reading the internet. We're getting better all the time, right? So once again, let me just review really quick. So we have Mercury to deal away with the distractions. Now we understand. The fonts mean a lot more than what I just thought. So that's handy dandy as well. Send to your Kindle. Save your eyes at the same time with the shifting of the colors of going to black there. Crafty 184, figuring out what reading level the article is. And then now we use TLDR to chunk it in 4 different ways for the quick chunking. Or if you want to go deeper into that whole chunking and scaffolding that reading is you use Resumer. Now, here's the question I get next. Well, yeah, but we have PDFs for our supplemental material.
Right,
mm-hmm,
right.
Right? Can we do PDFs? Can these things too? I go, those two can't, but I have something that can. So next comes in Summary, and Summary spelled SMMRY.com. And it does something that is similar, right? But what I love about Summary is you can copy text from somewhere else. So it might be your textbook, your digital textbook, throw it in there. You can go to the URL like we've done with TLDR and Resumer. But if you look at the bottom left corner on these yellow boxes, it says you can upload a file.
PDF.
There you go. So now you can upload a file and also chunk that information as well. Better yet, since this is not an actual extension, this is just a website, you can add this to your mobile devices as well.
Wow.
So your kids on the fly can do pretty much anything, anywhere, anytime. Doesn't that sound familiar? Right?
Agency, man. Student agency. They should be able to get whatever they need when they need it.
And that's what we're trying to go for. We're trying to meet that for all of our students. So once I get into that, right, I do this little bit with Google Translate. So I'm not, I'll be plugging too many things in, but let me just tell you, if you're working with English as additional learners, Microsoft, has a really great translator. But one of the reasons why I love Google Translate, it allows you to translate anything on the fly with the camera on your mobile device. That's one. Number 2, you can now choose many of I think there's 53 different languages that you can download. And once you download them to your phone, you don't need internet anymore. So it'll stay on your phone. So you can now have conversations with people who do not speak your language, right? And then the other reason why I love Google Translate is the fact that, I don't know about you guys, but I speak a lot faster than I type. So I'm teaching a lot of my students who have that same problem that I do, is to teach them how to text from going from speech to typing. And in my presentation, I always do this bit, where I said, "Hello, everyone!" ! New paragraph. I hope you are enjoying today's session, period. So I go in, I produce all the grammar because it does a few things for students. And I'm going to give a huge shout out here to Rebecca Hare. We had this really great conversation about pushing and pulling information in San Francisco. Rebecca, if you're listening, I did pay attention. So, I think about the same way. It's about pushing and pulling information with students. Because I show them this. I don't show them how I do it. And then they go off and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to type all my stuff like this now." And they go and they do it. They're like, "Hey, Mr. Cisneros, this doesn't sound right. There's supposed to be a pause here. How do I add a pause?" I'm like, "That's a great question. Go find out and then come and tell me."
Mm-hmm.
Because now they're interested. I'm not going to show you how to use, all these tools. I never show the kids how to do it. I just show it, like I showcase them, and they want to learn how to do it.
Right.
So once again, it's about pulling, that motivation from them. And, with Translate, and of course there's other tools like it out there. It does a really good job of doing that. But just, the fact that you're capable of doing it and then translating it to whatever language you want, it's a win-win, and then you can hear it back.
Great.
So part of that, I get this quite a bit. Well, Martin, now that you're talking about translation services, not all translators are great. And I'm like, no, you're absolutely right. But you have not met DeepL yet. And they're like, what do you mean about DeepL? Well, DeepL is something a little different. It's kind of scary for me to even talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it since I am here with you. If you go to deepl.com, you can see it's a translator, but it's a different type of translator. And what I'm showing right now is I'm showing their data. And if you look at this chart, you see this chart that has this huge bar that's blowing off the doors of these three little charts. Oh, the three small ones, those happen to be Google Translate, Microsoft Translator, and Facebook.
Okay. Wow.
So DeepL Translator is pretty huge, and they're like, why is it so better? I go, because it's using artificial intelligence and it's learning on its own.
Wow.
The best part I tell people is if you throw something in there, it understands sarcasm.
Really?
Yeah. So, I've thrown stuff in there, but, I had one teacher and they're like, why is this special? And I'm like, when I was a kid, I used to watch, certain programming with my parents, especially my dad. And my dad used to love watching this Mexican comedian called Cantinflas. Now, I know he spoke Spanish. I speak Spanish, but he spoke a different type of Spanish than I did, and I couldn't keep up with it, right? So one day when I first discovered this, I'm like, I'm gonna get a text of the transcript of this movie that we used to watch together, and I'm gonna put it there because there's a lot of sarcasm, there's a lot of innuendos in there, and it was able to and I'm like, oh, that's what he was saying. So that was my way of saying, oh no. Now I'm gonna recommend DeepL for my folks as well, because if it can do that for me,
wow,
I can only imagine what it can do for other people as well.
That's awesome.
Because even English language has tons of idioms and
It's not the easiest language to learn.
I learned that when I was in Europe this summer. That was like the little 7-year-old from Norway. When I would be sarcastic, he'd just kind of look at me like, and I was like, sorry, bud.
Right. And the last tool on this particular set is Read and Write by TextHelp, right? I love Read and Write. So the best way I tell people is I have a sample that I write. So I went online, grabbed an article, put it into a Google Doc, and I did what most English learner teachers do. You go in there and you highlight the most important words, or the words that that your students need to know in order to understand the concepts of the vocabulary for the lesson that you're doing. What I love about it is, I'm going to go up here and turn it on first. There we go. So what I love about it is, you can highlight certain, did I just turn it off? Of course I did.
And this is readandwrite.com? Or what is this?
It's Read and Write. It's by TextHelp. It's an extension.
Okay.
It's an extension. But what I love about it, that only works on Google. It works on the internet. So it works everywhere. I'm just showcasing one way of how I use it. So in here, I highlight a word, and up at the top, I can, click on a feature that gives me a picture dictionary of that particular word. So that for especially for beginning ELLs, this is really, really slick, right? Yeah. So they can now start understanding, oh, that's what that means, right? I can also grab whatever text and play it for you. And like everything, like there's other tools that allow you to do that, but the fact that it's all under one tool makes it really slick. My favorite part, one of my favorite features out of all this is I can grab whatever text and then click on the audio maker, which turns everything into an MP3 for me.
Wow.
I don't know if you guys have heard of podcasts before. Just want to throw that out there.
Sounds familiar.
Have you heard those? Yeah, that's a different way of grabbing information. And I almost like jumped 10 feet for joy last year when I saw the research that says whether you read a book traditionally or listen to it, you get the same out of it. It just depends how you. And I was just like, oh my gosh! Now I can tell everybody what I've been reading, because I gotta be honest with you. When I became a professional, and people used to ask me, Martin, what books are you reading? I used to shy away from telling my answer because most of it was audio, right? I love me some audiobooks. You would always find me the Barnes and Noble or whatever at the audiobook collection. It's my favorite way because I just just because of my life of commuting and all the stuff that I have to do. That's how I consume a lot of my information.
Same.
So now I can now imagine this, right? Imagine all the tools. Now you can chunk something, put it on a Google Doc, and then hit the audio maker. You can now chunk anything online and create it into an audiobook.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
Right?
I always feel like, I'm the same way, right? I read 30 plus books a year through Audible, and I put it out on Goodreads, and people are like, oh, do you have a hard copy? Can I borrow that? And I was like, it's on my Audible. And they're like, oh, you really didn't read it. Yeah, no, I did. I did. And in fact, I often have a Kindle version as well, just so that I actually have some kind of text. So I want to look things up pretty easily. But I felt the same way you did. I was embarrassed to say that I had read these books. And then I saw that same research and I was like, booyah, I am an auditory processor. I process information at a rapid speed through my. Not everybody can do that. I respect that.
Do you speed it up? 1.3?
Yeah. I'm 1.7.
1.5?
I'm 1.75 or 2 something.
Ooh, look at you. Okay. I bow. I'm a 1.5 guy myself.
There are times when you have to be like, especially if it's somebody with an accent or something, I might have to slow it down a little bit to gather it. But for the most part, I try to be 1.5 or higher just because I want to get through so much more text. And I had to work up to that. Don't get me wrong. Like I started at 1 and I was like, this is really going to be 35 hours. So I need to 1.2. I was like 1.25 and then I was like 1.5, 1.75. So I'm at usually 1.75. Unless it's a really slow, speaker, then I can go a little faster. But I think that there are children. So like one of my kids is definitely an auditory processor, and he can consume. I make him read the text and track while he's listening, just so that he's the connections that he's making on, especially some of the books that he's got to read for school. But my other kids are like, I need a book in my hand. And I'm like, that's great. So you're a visual. And other people are auditory, and some people are both, and that's totally fine. I love
different modalities. Yeah.
Every kid is,
I used to be the hard book reader, but time. Who has time to sit down for an hour every day and with a book? I don't.
No, I don't. But I have a commute. That's an hour.
Right. I walk the dog. It's just so much easier.
I get up early and wash the dishes sometimes just to get like an extra 20 minutes of either my podcast or something in. This is fantastic.
I'm the person that if I love the podcast so much, I will go around my block a few times or sit in my car until it's done.
These apps are phenomenal. I can say that some of them I've used, ReadWrite I've used. It is this one is paid for the full feature component. But often, unless
you're a teacher,
right? And you can get, and if your school subscribes to the package, it's often a better way to access this material as well. And I will be adding for sure some of your other ones that you added to my presentations and my tech tool belt for sure, because as a student, as I work back into student mode again myself, these are going to be huge as I need to digest tons of journal articles.
There's 2 other features in Read and Write that I say, at least for me, when I was in the classroom, this used to take me forever. And this is when I say the promise of tech is really what it stands for. So besides those features, one of my favorite features in Read and Write is once you go in there and you highlight all the words that that your EALs need in order to understand the concepts for whatever activity they're going to do next. This wonderful button up here that says vocabulary, if you click on that, it automatically goes in there and it's looking through all the highlighted words. And in a few seconds, it's going to generate a Google Doc that has the word, the meaning, the symbol and a spot for the students to write their own notes. So whether they're sketchnoting, whether they want to do the voice, whether they want to write it out, or whatever other way, they have a Padlet. They have an Adobe Spark, whatever they want to do in order to showcase. You now have this. Oh my gosh, do you know how many times I used to fake go to the doctor's office just so I can snag the magazine so I can go home and cut out pictures for my students to create this? And now the fact that it's a one button deal after I highlight, oh no, ladies, it gets even better, because here's the last part, right? So when I'm giving feedback for students right now, whatever notes they put on there, let's pretend, they write their notes here on that section. I'm going to highlight the notes part, and way up at the top, there is this spot that says voice note. Now I can click on that, right? I can click on the voice note, and I am now recording feedback for my student. So I have a minute to give them feedback, because sometimes you want to hear Mr. C, right? You want to hear Mr. C, because sometimes Mr. C's writing doesn't make any sense. Right. So now that I'm speaking to you and giving you feedback, number one, I'm allowed to give you feedback a lot quicker. And once I'm done, I'm going to hit insert. And what's kind of cool about this wonderful thing, it's going to insert a play button right next to there.
Wow.
So they can listen to me. And this is huge, once again, for our English as an additional language learners. It's a win-win. They'll get to hear it. They get to respond if they want to respond. And they hit resolve whenever they resolve that piece of feedback that I've given to them.
Wow. That's so cool.
Wait! I need to pick up my.
You gotta drop your AirPods again.
I just don't know where I left them. Wait, let's see. No. They're somewhere around here. I'm gonna drop my pen, the red pen. I'm gonna drop the red pen. Yeah, there we go.
That is so amazing. I can't wait. So my son's science teacher, literally has this template blank, and he has to go put in all of his words and the meanings and the symbols. If he knew,
just go in there, put a Jedi robe on, and just say, I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to make your life better as an instructor starting today.
Oh my gosh. I see where she's going, but I can tell you that if he figured this out, that had this extension, he'd be like, I just pushed a button and all of my work was just populated. This is so amazing. I love ReadWrite. I love ReadWrite even more now, because I usually show a lot of the free tools, and I've never really seen and dived into some of these really cool pieces. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. So that's where I'm going to leave you today.
Yeah, wow.
I'm going to stop there.
I don't know that I could take anymore. My brain is going to explode. These are phenomenal tools. You're focusing on them for English. English for all language learners, but I'm going to tell you that these are actually tools for kids with special needs, kids with different learning styles.
Well, I was thinking too, the homeschoolers who have the different age groups. And
yeah, once again, my curve is EALs, but the reality is for all learners.
Everyone.
Tell me you cannot use any of these. No, we all can.
Everybody,
Well, I'm in the private sector, and I'm thinking, if I could get some of my contracts through here and give me a quick synopsis of what's important, I'm like, oh, nice.
Because those are 30-page documents.
Oh my God,
sometimes.
Yeah, easy.
This is amazing. This is great. This is for everyone. I love these tools. I love that you spent time with us today. I know you could speak on probably 4 or 5 more episodes, so we'll have you back for sure on other topics. So if our folks want to get a hold of you, so we have people all over the country listening to us, and in some cases all over the world in other countries, but they want to reach out to you. They want to know more. They want to follow you on Twitter. What's the best way for our folks to follow you and keep in touch with what you're doing?
Sure. So they can go to my website, thetechprofe.com. On Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm also the Tech Profe on whichever social media you have up there.
Awesome.
I love to, I'm always searching for people to bounce ideas off of as well. So I always tell people I have my own social media policy. So I'm going to say this right now. If you follow me on Facebook, be warned, you're going to see Star Wars. You're going to see me. You're going to see my family. You're going to see stuff that I love to do, and you're going to see me eat. If you are a friend of mine on LinkedIn, all you're going to see are presentations that I put together, videos of types of learning, professional learning experiences that I do. On Twitter, it's just innovation in education. If you're an innovator in education, you're doing some great stuff. Doesn't matter what position you have, I'm following you. And I tell people, I'll click on your profile, look at your last 10 posts, and if anything inspires me of your last 10 posts, I'm following you. If something doesn't inspire me, then maybe next time. You can always be a friend of mine on Facebook. And then Instagram, my policy for Instagram is just your because it's a visual thing. Show me something that's really, really slick. And if it's with innovation in education, you got a follower here. Okay. And yeah, so anyway, there you go.
That's fantastic. And so where are you speaking? I know we're all going to be at Q in spring. That's in March in California.
So that's in March. If you are around San Jose, Silicon Valley, let's see, in December, I'm speaking at the Equity Engage with Tech Hub at the county office. Or I'm also going to, oh no, there's something even coming up even closer. Let's see. I can't pull, where's my calendar? Here we go. Let's see, that is today. And I have a few things coming up as well. On this Wednesday, whether you're here or you can catch it online, Building a Bridge to STEAM, Collaboration for Student Success. I'll be doing that. On December is the Text Help. And then January, I'll be in Southern California. So if you're in the Calexico, El Centro area, I'll be down there. And then we have Q. I'll also be I'll be running the GABE Tech component this year at GABE, California Association of Bilingual Education. And I'll just stop there, but you can find all that information at thetechprofe.com or follow me on Twitter, and I'll post all that wonderful stuff on there as well.
Awesome.
And ISTE, will you be at ISTE next year?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. It's in Anaheim, folks.
I know. We're so excited.
Literally the most magical place on earth.
Yeah, no, it's I was like, my whole team can go this year, and I'm not paying for any driving, and I'm not paying for any hotels. But you can all go. I'll pay for registration.
Win-win. That's awesome.
30-minute drive. So it's a great piece.
Oh yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you again, chatting with you more, keeping in touch with what you're doing. Thank you so much for your time today. Brenda has one more question for you, I think.
We always used to ask our guests if you have any books that you would like to recommend that have made an impact on you, either professionally or personally.
Now that I can say I read a lot of books through audio,
Nice.
But the one that I'm going to recommend is one that I actually read. And it's one of those books that, I look back and I'm thinking, no, if I ever write a book, it's going to be something like this. But this is the ELL's Teacher's Toolbox by Larry Ferlazzo.
Okay.
Yeah, Larry did I've been a huge fan of his since the very beginning, because his, everything that he does around using technology with English language learners up in Sacramento here in California has just been phenomenal. I've learned so much from him, and it's a different take since he does high school, and I used to work primarily for elementary and middle school. It's a great way to see the different views of using the same tool. So for me, I need to connect with people who are doing stuff differently than I am. And even though it's the same tool, just like all the tools that I mentioned to you, they're not new. It's just how we use them.
Right.
And that for me has always been a huge win. But that is a one that I always tell people, if you are new, and even though it says for English language learners, it's for all learners, really. Mm-hmm. I look at his stuff, but he does a really great job of breaking it down for you. And I highly recommend that one. And then of course, our friends, Marlena Hepburn and John Cripples, Edu Protocols. I think it's just a really great base for people who still are new to blended learning. And it's a really great way of getting in there and finding these quick, starts into this world. Because for me, the whole, EdTech is I call it the promise of technology. Mm-hmm. When you use technology well, you get time back. Right. You enhance whatever you're doing. And if we can do that for all students,
bonus.
Win-win.
Win-win for everyone.
Bonus. Yeah, for sure. Those are some of our favorite books too, are the John and Marlena's books. Absolutely. And we'll check out the other recommendation. Thank you again, Martine, for your time today. Great opportunity, great information for our listeners, new teachers, veteran teachers, special ed teachers, English as an additional language teachers. I hope that they all grab onto your Twitter and your social media and follow you and use some of these apps that you talked about. Definitely check out the video component to this podcast episode on our YouTube channel and or our website at mytechtoolbelt.com. Once again, thank you so much for your day.
Very
for your time
enlightening.
today. Yeah, so fun, and we'll invite you back.
Yes.
Awesome. Would love to.
All right. Thanks, Martine. And
Bye.
Bye. And
we're out.